We now know a 13-year-old boy was killed when a blown tire caused a school bus to veer off the highway, hit a guardrail, and turn on its side in Chester County. That crash shut down a busy portion of I-77 for hours. And in the aftermath of the crash, some parents are voicing concerns over the lack of seat belts on school buses. Now, but are they required here in North and South Carolina? I want to bring in Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes. And Khalif, we do know that 8 states do have some sort of seatbelt law for school buses. What about North or South Carolina?
I mean, first of all, let's start with this, Brian. This is an extremely unfortunate situation. You're talking about the death of a child as a parent, of a teenager as a parent, of 4 kids that ride the bus on a regular basis. This is a parent's worst nightmare. Looking at the footage yesterday, I'm like, wow, I cannot imagine going through that. And so obviously the first thing you're looking at is, well, what are the rules? What are the laws? You mentioned that there's 8 states that talk about and have laws on the books that govern seatbelts. North Carolina and South Carolina have no laws for large school buses. And I got to be clear, large school buses, those are the ones that was involved in this incident yesterday. But North Carolina does have on the books a law for seatbelts for what they call school bus size A. That's not even the minibus, because those were size B. This is typically like a van, a little bit bigger than a 16-passenger van. If you look at the rule, it talks about being able to hold almost 30+ students. In those type of buses, there is a requirement that they have seat belts and that every student have a seat belt on when on the bus. But when you're talking about the larger buses, and specifically the one that was involved yesterday, there are no requirements in North Carolina or South Carolina for seat belts to be on the seat belts on those buses.
You know, it's hard to say whether a seatbelt would have been able to save this young boy's life or prevented some sort, but we do know that seatbelts do save lives, whether in crashes and that sort of thing. But what are the reasons why you don't have a seatbelt, and to say that you would require that in a larger school bus?
I'd probably say cost is probably the first thing. If you're talking about a lot of these places in these school districts already are trying to figure out how to juggle and deal with cost, right? And so if you're saying, how do we implement adding seatbelts to buses that are already out there? Okay, if that's not going to be a way, how do we roll out seatbelts as we move forward? So every new bus that comes out is going to be required to have a seatbelt until we get to a magical number of like 2020, 2030, and now every bus has it because we've now decommissioned some buses. There's a number of ways to get there, but I can imagine that cost would be the number one hurdle to implementing something like that statewide or nationwide. And then the other thing is the lack of research in research to show that seatbelts would actually have saved lives in these type of situations. I mean, you think going on the other side of it is that you're on this bus, you have all these padded seats, there are a number of things around you to protect where you wouldn't need a seatbelt, but I'd say that, and there's probably not enough research to support for or against. So when you have the people that are lobbying for one way or the other, it's a cost number. Again, do we have enough information to support the cost that would be allowed to carry some measure like this going forward? But if you're the parent, you're not thinking about cost. You're just saying, what could you have done to ensure that you protected and saved my child?
The safety of a child is also paramount, is the ultimate thing that you always want to have when you're traveling with your kid.
And there's no dollar amount. You're not going to be able to say, well, even if it costs $100 million, what price can you put on ensuring that our children are safe? And so if I'm on the other side of the argument, I'm saying it doesn't matter how much it costs to get there. We want to ensure that every child is safe. But I can understand and appreciate the argument from the other opposition, which would be there's no data. There's nothing to support that the seatbelts would have and can help in the future in these instances. And if we're looking even further down the road, if you're looking at some potential lawsuit, some potential wrongful death, that's what would be the argument of contention. Could a seatbelt have helped? Would a school district be, held liable and responsible for the death? Would a bus manufacturer, because they haven't included them? Those are a number of discussions that will also happen. And I think things like this actually allow the discussion to go further when you're talking about what could have been done. This is an unfortunate situation that you don't want to have to use to prompt the discussion, but because we are normally reactive, because it takes something like tragedy for our laws to actually be implemented, this is exactly what sometimes lawmakers need to be able to address situations that they've kind of neglected for years.
And that's here to button up this sad and tragic story from what happened here in Chester County. Is this something that you could see happening here with the North Carolina legislature, the South Carolina legislature, the lawmakers getting together in each of the states, respectively, and trying to do something right now?
In an era where it seems like bipartisanship isn't happening, where folks are trenched in on both sides of the aisle to their own unique issues, I think this is one that's uniformly where both aisles can find a way to come together. It's really just cost. If both aisles in both states can figure out how can we put the cost aside and put the priority of children in the forefront, I think this is an issue. And it's been raised before in the past the defense and the pushback has always been there's no research, there's no proof. And I think now we're past the research, we're past the proof, and we're trying to figure out how we can get results.
All right, Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes.